Hello, good afternoon. This is Rachel Treese, CEO of FTS Global, and we are recording a very special edition of Flex in the City from around the globe. And today with me on Flex in the City, I have Jim Fitzpatrick, who is the President and CEO of NICSA. I have Dan Houlihan, who is the EVP and Head of Asset Services at Northern Trust, and is also the Chairman of the NICSA Board. Nicolas Mackel, the CEO of Luxembourg for Finance. And last but definitely not least, we have Paul O'Neill, Independent Director of Insigma Hengtian. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome, first of all, Jim.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Welcome, Nicholas.
Hi there.
And welcome, Paul.
Hello, Rachel.
Great to have you all here. It is obviously unprecedented times at the moment, and so we want to make sure that we are giving a message to the financial services industry. And I'd really like to ask a few questions of you all. So my first question is for Jim and Paul. Both of you actually lived through the 9/11 crisis, I understand, in financial services, and I'm really curious to know, in that crisis time when you were both managing operations, what did you learn from this time about how leaders need to show up? First to Jim.
Thanks, Rachel. Certainly a terrible day in our country's history, but the two takeaways from my perspective is, one, that it was really important for leaders to be visible and to communicate regularly with the employees at all different levels. People don't necessarily expect that you have all the answers, but what is very helpful all the time is to communicate frequently so they understand what your vision is, how you're assessing and handling situations, and what the plan is moving forward. I think the second element to that is that you need to make sure that your employees and the staff know that you're also concerned about their well-being. If they're comfortable, I think, in those two regards, they'll be able to perform for you in the crisis situation with a lot more confidence.
Absolutely. And Paul, anything else to add to that?
Well, Jim's explanation is pretty complete, because I would say the most important thing is communication. It's no different today than it was back then. And regular communication, making sure that everyone is engaged, everybody's marching in the same direction, and everybody has a place to escalate whatever issues on a regular basis.
And I'm curious to know, what did you both learn as leaders from that particular crisis?
Well, I'll take a swing at that a bit. You know, one of the things that I learned is that many things will change, because crisis brings anxiety, it brings concern, but it also brings opportunity. And that what you find is that people get very creative in solving problems. And if you look out into the future, that you can find opportunities to improve your operations, improve your communications. And I would even go so far as to say examples today that we're seeing are people doing telehealth. You know, is one of the things that I've been paying particular attention to during the crisis. And I think coming out of this, the whole health industry is going to move towards telehealth solutions, because people are becoming very comfortable engaging like we are right now. And instead of going in and into an office where there could be some contagion.
Thank you, Paul. So I'm going to move on to Dan, because Dan, you're actually in the thick of it right now. You are managing a global financial services operation. So what are the challenges that you personally are experiencing now as you're running that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would agree with both Jim and Paul on the communication piece. That's obviously key. But we've got, in our business, we've got 20,000 people around the world in, I think, 30 different countries. And so the biggest challenge really has been enabling roughly 95% of our workforce to actually work from home, and then get into a mode of governing and communicating that's obviously very different from what we've historically been doing with people in the office. And so I've been very impressed and proud that we've been able to keep things running. We obviously serve as an important part of the daily sort of execution of the financial system, and in terms of pricing mutual funds and moving cash and settling trades. So very important that we continue on this path. But one of the interesting things, just from a leadership standpoint, that I've found, and it's been somewhat humbling, is the first port of call for us has obviously been the health and welfare of our partners around the world and our clients. And that's just a different way of thinking from the day-to-day of, making money, et cetera. And as a leader, are we doing the right things, not from a financial perspective, but are we doing the right things for our teams to look after their health and well-being from a physical perspective, but also their health and well-being from a financial perspective. So for me, super humbling to really, be able to focus on who the real important people are in our company right now. And it's the folks that are doing the work.
Absolutely. And have you had to adapt your leadership style in this time of crisis now?
Yeah, I have actually, and that's been interesting too, because it's easy to fall into the trap of wanting to get into the mode of command and control, and with such a large organization, that's actually the wrong thing to do, in the sense that we've got really smart, capable people around the world. So really, my function now is to enable them and ensure that they have the tools and the capacity to get the work done, given that they're the experts. So really, it's actually staying out of the way, but constantly evaluating what else can I do as a leader to empower people, whether that's getting people laptops for home or monitors. So very, very, very different approach in a crisis like this.
Absolutely. So you're really operating more as a leader, as a coach, or a leader as a supportive leader. Great. So I'd now like to move on to Europe and to Nicolas. Nicolas, I'm sure you'd agree with me that the world is going to emerge post-crisis into a totally different animal. And so what leadership do you think is going to be required in this time of uncertainty and ambiguity?
Well, I think we definitely would agree, all of us, that we are going through unprecedented times. What is happening here in the world is something that we have in our lifetimes never seen. We are currently in a tunnel because nobody can really know where we will emerge, what the changes will be that this crisis will bring about. But I think what everybody is looking for is certain leadership qualities. And the first, I think they have all been mentioned. The first one would be empathy, meaning that leaders should reassure people. People are currently being very uncertain, not to say anguished, and what they want is somebody to give them a sense of reassurance. The second is honesty. I think everybody is capable of taking the truth, as has been said. Even if we don't know exactly what is happening, at least let's be honest with our people. And the third is really a sense of direction. Doesn't need to be the clear solution, but at least show that you know where you're going. You know what you have to do. You don't know where it will lead you, but you know what it is you need to do in order to get someplace. And these, I think, are the qualities that everybody is yearning for the moment. But ultimately, yes, it is true, the world will be a different place. I don't know, and I don't think it will be totally different. There will be many of the things we've been struggling with a month ago that will still be there. Don't you worry that climate change will still be high on the agenda. Regulation will still be high on the agenda for the financial services industry, but definitely many other things will have changed. Some for good, some not so good. But we will have to see. We will have to assess this as we go forward. It's really a process.
And what's your biggest prediction? Do you have one?
And complete acceleration of the whole digitalization phenomenon. I think it has been mentioned by the others. Everything around teleworking, telehealth, communications in a different way is something that will have been completely boosted by this, because I myself had never used such video conferencing tools as Zoom or WebEx or any of the others, and they're actually quite convenient, I must say. I've been traveling extensively over the last years, and I mean, there's probably a lot that can be done via this rather than accumulating jet lag.
Absolutely. So talking about jet lag, I'm now going to move right back to the USA again, to you, Jim. And I'd like to ask you what you think is going to help make the financial services industry sustainable.
Well, I think one of the things that's going to be very important moving forward, and many organizations have focused on it today, is diversity. You know, I think organizations need to reflect the constituents that they serve and the clients that they serve, the employee base that they have. And, you know, we see a growing trend, not only in the US, but around the world with regard to the diversity. And, you know, I'm happy to be part of the Diversity Project North America that we launched as a follow-on to our colleagues in the UK who launched the original Diversity Project. And we're trying to expand that effort within the asset management community in North America, which I think will help the industry be sustainable and better for everybody in the years ahead.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. And so moving to Asia Pacific, Paul, you're working a lot with Asia Pacific, and in particular with China. Has there been a different way in which the Chinese have reacted to this crisis, and has your own leadership style needed to adapt to those different cultural differences?
Well, I find it very interesting, but I'm not surprised that the Chinese their approach to solving this crisis came in a rather draconian way, or at least that was the perception by the rest of the world, that they took as quick steps as they did early on. But they're proving to be quite efficient, and culturally they can be very efficient. But you know, we're seeing lots of things come out of there, a lot of opportunity, because you know I regularly visit Hangzhou, China. And that's where Alibaba is, and a number of the new tech businesses are being generated from now. And even in this quick time, one of the startups over there has brought out a pair of glasses that are virtual, that can actually look into an audience of people and measure their temperatures from the glasses. So security guards can in a matter of 1 minute, can look at as many as 700 people and see if anyone has a temperature there. And that actually can feed back into a virtual database, and they can identify the individual. It's fascinating, wow. You know, what's coming out of there.
Wow. And the leadership style, is it different?
No, it's not. No, the leaders, I work with the university over there, Zhejiang University, as a partner in the joint venture with State Street. And, you know, they're a very compassionate, very intelligent group of individuals. First and foremost, it's about the health and welfare of the staff. Fortunately, in our organization, we've got 2,000 people, and not one of them was involved in the virus. But that, I get updates from them 3 times a day. But that, first and foremost, is their concern. I also have to say, being a technology company, we're very connected. Everyone's able to work from home. So 80% of the staff are back in the office. 20% of them are home, but they're only home because they're taking care of elderly parents or children.
Right. Very good. So I'm going to move over to you, Dan, if I may, and ask you, what kind of skills do you think will be needed by financial services companies in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I don't think, well, let me take the virus situation first. I don't think that this crisis fundamentally changes the skill sets going forward, other than perhaps corporations having medical staff on the payroll and on hand. I think, you know, as I think about how the next 5 years unfolds, there's a couple of big trends. Obviously, there's the growth of the millennial workforce, for example. So I can tell you that 75% of the people that we hired last year around the world, which is probably over 1,000 people, were millennials, and we've got 5 generations of workforce. So we have to think about the nature of work and how we organize work and the tools that we give people to be sustainable in the future. But I think the hard skills will likely be certainly data science, skills around artificial intelligence. I think behavioral science certainly is an emerging trend, particularly on the portfolio management side, but also on the consumer side. Certainly tech skills around the cloud, cybersecurity. And so I do think you're going to see more and more sort of emergence of more nascent technologies, and certainly the pace we fully expect will continue to accelerate as we go forward. So finding those skill sets are really important, particularly as you know, as senior leaders. What's really important is that we bring that new capability into the organization. And generally speaking, they're a younger generation, but it's important to give them a seat at the table so that they can, you know, help to educate us not only on what's possible, but, you know, how do we set our strategy and have an environment that's going to be suitable for the next generation of workforce.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan. And Nicola, what role do you think leaders have in terms of rebuilding not only the assets, but also confidence in financial services going forward?
Well, you know, I mean, in the aftermath of the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, the financial services industry lost a lot of credibility. At the time, it was really the problem, because the crisis actually emerged from the financial services industry. In this case, I think what is becoming very clear is that the financial services industry is not the problem, it is part of the solution. It is there to help small businesses to bridge the crisis by extending their loans and so forth, continuing investments and all that. And I think leaders have to understand, by leaders you mean political leaders, but also corporate leaders have to understand that here financial services is part of the solution and is there to help us mitigate the effects of this crisis. I think one other thing that we also have to understand, which is extremely important, is contrary to the fact that many tend to have as a reaction to this crisis to raise the drawbridges, and countries do things on their own, look after themselves. What we really will have to do the moment this is over is to come together again as an international community, because this is a global crisis and we need global solutions to tackle it and to tackle the next editions of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Back to you, Dan. There are many good things that this crisis might have taught us. What opportunities do you see to make financial services better as a result of it?
So I know that Jim and Paul share the same passion about this as I do. So I hope that one of the good things that will come of this is more humanization of this industry. And by that, I mean, this industry is obviously large. It's a critical industry in terms of the financial system. But at the end of the day, this is about the health and financial well-being of individuals. Even though we're all running commercial enterprises, trying to drive profitable growth, even if I'm supporting an institutional investment manager, at the end of the day, they're investing money on the behalf of retirees. And that is a very human thing. It's a very important thing. It's a critical thing. And I think, and I hope that more and more firms will continue to make that connection. And I think those that do that well, frankly, will have an advantage over others. So I you know, and we do a lot as an industry to give back. So I'm not suggesting it's not there, but we can always do more. So I just hope that this is a check for everybody to make sure we keep perspective on why we're all doing this, who it really benefits, and keep that going.
You're certainly speaking my language, Dan, that's for sure. And so I'm going to conclude this podcast today by asking Jim, I learned today that you are a certified coach as well as having been a great leader in financial services. So I'd like to ask you if you were offering some wisdom to a financial services leader that's listening to this podcast today, what is the wisdom that you would like to share with those leaders?
You know, I think that would be that organizations and individuals are resilient, right? We certainly saw that, you're referencing back to, you know, the tragedy of 9/11, but I think you see that happening now through the COVID-19 crisis around the world. You know, I see it with staff at NICSA. I see it with industry participants working together to try to solve challenges that we all face. I see it in the community that I live in, right? That people are trying to figure out how to get through this together. I think everybody hopes, but I think we all know inside that, you know, we're going to come out better on the other side. It might be a painful experience. It might be a difficult experience. But at the end of the day, people around the world will be resilient, and that, you know, they can lean on that as they work through this crisis internally. And we obviously hope to come out better on the other side.
That's great. Thank you so much. So I'd like to give great thanks to Nicola, to Dan, to Paul, and to Jim for being with us on this global COVID-19 special of Flex in the City. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.